the Around the NFL podcast. Knows what they call you down at the station, Jack.
Welcome to another edition of Around the NFL. My name is Dan Hanzus. I got a virtual room filled with some heroes here, Marc Sessler and Gregg Rosenthal. And yes, we kept this open-ended audience of loyal listeners this season, that when there was a particularly newsy Monday morning, we might break out of our typical cycle, which has been Monday Night Recap plus news, and just give the news its own little platform. And that's what we're doing today, because there is a lot to get to. How is everybody? I've missed you guys. I feel like I haven't seen you in easily 6 hours.
Well, we've also been texting. That's the thing. Like, we spend so much time together on air, certainly off air at work. But then it's usually like the minute we leave work, then we start texting, and it basically continues until the next show. So you are my brothers.
There's a healthy codependency, at play. But we have only done this news show once, and we the bar needed to be high. A lot of quarterback stuff happened, and before the show happens, Gregg typically will create a little news rundown, and it was like 5 items, and it got longer and longer and longer and longer. So it's like, we got to go do this.
Well said, Mark. You put a bow on it beautifully.
I thought he was going to say it turned into a Russian novel by the end. That's a Markism. little like Tolstoy, a little War and Peace here. The news.
So yes, check out the Week 8 Sunday recap, and we will have the Monday Night Football recap for the game between. Mark,
what are we saying? I was drifting off to space.
Detroit. Come on, the Lions, the Raiders.
Detroit and the Raiders.
The team of ATL versus Jimmy G, the most handsome man in the league. Let's go.
Just a different vibe when Mark is in that home space, I got to tell you.
I do like the plaid, though, so everyone check it out on YouTube.
All right, let's get into it. No sense messing around any further. Let's do some news.
It just didn't feel like it should end like that. You understand only one team at the end of the season is able to walk off the field victorious. It's kind of a cruel reality of this business, but we'll keep working, and I will continue to have the goal that someday I'm standing here talking to you all, and it's a much, much bigger stage. So thank you.
I know it's not the most popular take on this show. In fact, I believe, Mark, you excused yourself from the studio when we talked the Quarterbacks Netflix series that ran this summer. But I thought that was one of my favorite NFL Films productions that I've seen in recent years. If there was a tugboat cut, we're getting rid of everything Marcus Mariota based. And then we take it down. But then the two figures that are left, Patrick Mahomes, possibly the greatest quarterback who's ever lived, playing at the height of his powers during a Super Bowl championship run, covering him day to day during that run. And then Kirk Cousins, who is perhaps the most, lightning rod quarterback of his generation. And the news became official just before we went on today. The Vikings announced that Cousins did indeed tear his Achilles tendon in Sunday's win over the Green Bay Packers. He's out for the rest of the season. The timeline and details of his upcoming surgery will be determined this week per the team. And again, there are implications for the here and now for the Vikings about what happens next with them, which we're going to get to, and also the bigger picture for Cousins, who is in a walk year of his contract that the Vikings specifically chose to let this year play out. And he just so happened, Mark, to be having one of the best seasons of his career when he took that fateful step at Lambeau Field. So here we are now, Cousins out for the year, a great season cut short, and his future an unknown.
You started to feel like this Vikings team, record aside, was a team that had a better chance with the way he was playing to operate as like a berserker down the stretch, potentially make the playoffs and maybe do some damage there. There's just a lot to like in this offense. And when you get this version of Cousins, I don't know, it felt like the ceiling was a mystery in a good way for them. And so I think there's sort of a feeling of depression around this development because, yes, like it's one thing if a young first round pick was stepping in or someone that had a lot of promise. There's really nothing behind him right now. And it changes the NFC. I mean, I feel like from another angle, a team like the Lions that doesn't play the Vikings till week 16 and week 18, they basically, this division is an empty husk. And so it's like it changes a weird NFC wildcard picture. It changes the NFC North, and it changes the career arc of Kirk Cousins. We don't know where he'll play next.
Yeah, I think if you look at that wildcard picture, that 7th spot is going to be funky. And that's even assuming, second place in the NFC East, whether it's Cowboys or Eagles, second place in the NFC West, assuming the Seahawks, keep it going and can make the playoffs, and the 49ers. Then that 7th spot, who the heck knows where it's coming from? I would have maybe made the Vikings the favorite after yesterday. They were 4-1 in their last 5 games, and they have a spicy defense and a quarterback playing, as a Pro Bowl quarterback. It's heartbreaking. I think the point of those shows, quarterback, other than to make money, is from the NFL Films perspective to create an attachment with a player, with a team that wouldn't be there. And I think how they portrayed Kirk Cousins absolutely did that. And I think that's actually why it's resonating even more, Dan, is because of that show.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the other point I wanted to make, that I felt like the people that watched that and have followed his career, there was kind of a Kirk-assance going on this year. So for it to end in such sudden fashion when he's playing really some of the best football of his career at, I believe, age 36 now, that is a real crushing thing. In terms of what the Vikings do, and we talked a little bit on Sunday night, and I was in a little bit of a different camp because I didn't think the Vikings should trade a draft pick of value, and I mean like a day 1 or day 2 draft pick, to bring in a veteran to just put somebody there. I wouldn't mortgage the future to try to save this season where they are right now. But there is a report out there, Greg, from Pro Football Talk, of another name that's out there who would address both the here and now and the future, and that would make a lot of sense to me.
Well, yeah, Mike Florio, who is a closet Vikings fan throughout Kyler Murray. It's a lot to happen in the next 2 days, and that's because they weren't. If they could possibly think about Kyler Murray, they weren't thinking about it 2 days ago. So it's a lot to try to wrap your mind around. But Kyler is an interesting name the next 2 days between them and Atlanta.
Greg, what was the reporting
just
exactly
think about
from Florio?
I think he was really just throwing it out there more than anything. Almost wishful thinking. There hasn't been any hard reporting about what they might do or won't do. But yeah, Nick Mullins is hurt. They have Jaron Hall, who was a 5th-round rookie, and they're going to bring in someone, whether it's a backup to Hall or maybe like a Case Keenum type. They're going to bring in someone.
One name that has sort of been linked to the Vikings because Colt McCoy worked out for the team recently. He was with Kevin O'Connell for 3 years in Washington. They were glued together in preparation every week, so he knows him well. He would know the attack to some degree. I don't know. I guess like Carson Wentz is still sitting out there. Someone like we talked about, maybe Matt Ryan gives them a call. Florio, more like this was more just like wild speculation. Wondered if Kevin O'Connell, who was teammates with Tom Brady, would maybe make a phone call in that direction. That feels like lunacy to me. But this offense is like set to go. That's the one thing. It's like I don't think the Vikings should give up on the season if they self-scout their quarterback position and say, we've got nothing here currently. I don't think you ride with Nick Mullins. Like, do you waste another year of Justin Jefferson, a year of Jordan Addison's rookie contract? I think they're a sneaky good team if they get functional quarterback play.
They showed a shocking amount of confidence in Jaron Hall in those 2 series, letting him throw on early downs, letting him throw on 3rd and 8 when they needed to burn clock. He fumbled and kind of burned them, and they did hit a 3rd and long. But they got to get someone, and I don't know. You still got to play these 7 games. I'm with you, not mortgaging the future, Dan. But for a 4th-round pick, or you just try to do the best that you can.
Right.
And it's funny, it might give Kirk a better chance to return there, I actually think. Because now he's not going to be healthy till the middle of next offseason. It's weird. Whoever signs Kirk is going to have to kind of play it both ways and not totally count on him.
You know what, though? I think he would have a robust market in free agency. I think people would, seeing how he played this season, knowing the way players can recover from even a serious injury like an Achilles, I think he would have a big market and would get paid big time money. We'll see. Yeah, I do agree. You don't just give up on the season, but like I'll use the other, like when Aaron Rodgers pops his Achilles, part of the reason like that was such a tragic thing for Jets fans is that you looked at the roster and you said, this looks like a potential Super Bowl roster with a loaded defense and playmakers on offense. They just need a QB to make it go. So when you think about should they go get a quarterback, it was like, okay, because that maybe they could hoist the Lombardi. If they added a quarterback in Minnesota, how much does it lift the ceiling in terms of what they can do? It is a wide open conference. I'll say that.
Lions.
I would love the Kyler Murray thing. That makes sense.
I mean,
Be spicy.
That would be wild. But if you're like saving up draft picks or you're thinking about, okay, we need to find a quarterback of the future at some point, so let's not burn our draft picks or our cap space. Like, it's for someone like Kyler Murray, like
right,
a number one
so
overall draft pick who's had some pretty good production.
And it's just interesting, I guess, that it just so happens that the timing coincides exactly with A, the trade deadline and deadline spur actions, and B, Kyler Murray being cleared to play and this exceeding weirdness coming out of Arizona about not wanting to play him. Let's see. Other news, other injury news, Matthew Stafford. His near future is up in the air. At the Athletics, Jordan Rodriguez reports that the Rams are, quote, evaluating a range of potential scenarios for Stafford after he suffered a thumb injury on Sunday in that blowout loss to the Cowboys. They have a Week 9 matchup against the Packers before they hit their bye. So it seems like potentially Stafford is on the shelf this week and then gets the bye to recover, but it could go beyond that. Greg.
Yeah, the report says they haven't ruled out injured reserve. So that would all but end the Rams season. And again, the timing's interesting with the trade deadline here. Did they possibly think of just pulling the ripcord here, trading some people? For this to be reported in this way, and she's the only one that's really reported this, indicates to me like the best case scenario is probably that first thing that you said, if you want Stafford to return, that there's a range of outcomes, and it's going to be cold in Green Bay. They even mentioned like the weather this week, like with the bye coming up, that would be unlikely. But when they do further tests and kind of see how it goes the rest of the week, like it might be pushing it, and they might have to be careful. And then it's suddenly, again, Mark, whoever's got the Rams on their schedule the next 4 weeks, like totally gets lucky because Stetson Bennett is on a reserve list right now, a non-football illness list. They haven't given details about that, but it's Brett Rippon as the backup.
Yeah, it's you were demoralized by Dallas, then this was the anti-icing on the cake, and it's 2 years in a row where the Rams are thrown into the blender because of losing Stafford. And I mean, like Cousins, we've been talking about Stafford correctly for the last month, that it's not his, numbers so much, but he's playing as well as we've ever seen him play. He's throwing the ball as well as Matthew Stafford ever has. And there was sort of an energy and a spirit to this Rams team, and he was right at the heart of it. And you kind of lose your North Star now, and you're back in that wilderness where it's like, if you lose him for, if he goes on IR, check you later, Rams. I mean, it's just, it's like the drop off from QB 1 to 2 on a lot of these teams is pretty drastic.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Giants in a second because I had a thought on that about what's going on in the depth charts in our league right now. Mark, what would be anti-icing on the cake? Are you scraping off essentially the top layer of what's already like a pretty like cake?
Yeah, like it would be, icing on the cake would suggest, well, this is just a beautiful thing to taste and experience.
But anti-icing would be what?
Like a layer of, if you were to go into like your sink and like deep scrape whatever's down that sink pipe and then put that on top of a cake that already didn't taste good.
Maybe it would be like antifreeze on the cake. You
that
just
would
drop
work.
some antifreeze and it ruins the cake. You know what's a little more antifreeze on this cake is, and I know it's a little awkward to talk fantasy football after injuries. Of course, we're disappointed for these players.
Oh, our society is long past the stage where it's seen as awkward. We just talk about it.
And it's disappointing for these teams and these men. But if you were enjoying Jordan Addison's insane season or Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and all this stuff, like it's not going to be the same in the next few weeks.
In other quarterback news, boys, true to what I said on Sunday, I couldn't believe it. I didn't think it would ever happen, but the first game that I teed up, this morning for a rewatch was indeed Titans football, where Will Levis did look really fun in lighting up the Falcons defense. The Falcons on their side of the ball finally, mercifully benched Desmond Ridder, who's been holding them back all year. Taylor Heineke comes in and plays well, and that team produces in the second half. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how committed to this bit will Arthur Smith be? Because there is no way you could go back to Ridder after Heineke badly outplayed the starter. But Arthur Smith has kind of made it a joke of like how to handle a roster and how to deal with the media and being truthful and honest and make sense and be logical. So let's see if he finds a way to keep Ridder in the lineup moving forward. Here's what Arthur Smith had to say on Monday about his starter.
I got to see where he's at. So that's all best I can give you. I got to see where he's at. I got to see if that's the best thing for this team this week. Obviously, it's not something I'm concerned long term. He's done a lot of good things, but we got to find a way to go win this game. So whether if it's Taylor, that's what we'll do. But my concern is Dez, and obviously any long term. He got back out there. I don't think he's ready.
Okay, someone translate it because it might as well be another language.
I'm going to translate.
Yeah.
Taylor Heineke starting Wednesday. That's
but what was all that stuff about Dez? About I got to see with Dez, and
okay, so he's like hiding behind the injury thing still. Now he was tested for a concussion, and he kept saying, "Look, health can affect you," and so we got to see how he's feeling. But then he also said, "Like I'm concerned about him as a person." And so
that's what I mean. Like, what are we doing here?
Right. I think he's maybe a little scarred from the Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill transition, which Mariota took very poorly and had some issues with Arthur Smith about.
Well, he quit the team.
No, back in Tennessee, I mean. It's confusing. Oh, yeah. It's confusing, the Arthur Smith, Marcus Mariota benchings, but good point. There was one last year, too. I'm thinking about the one back in Tennessee. And so he kept pointing out, like, long-term, it's Dez. And so, but we got to win a game this week. And so that, to me, said. But
if he's cleared, Mark, if he's cleared this hypothetical health hurdle that's being floated out there, potentially in a fugazi manner, does that mean that Desmond Ridder would start if he's healthy?
I think
it seems like the door was open.
That quote, I mean, if you read it versus, because I think the way he speaks, sometimes you kind of drift away as the listener. But I've never heard him say this. It said, it's not something I'm concerned about long-term. He's done a lot of good things, but we got to go find a way to win this game. Like, he's never introduced, like, yeah, but like, no matter how healthy he is or how good of a job Desmond Ridder's done, we're in a different situation now as a team. So I think for me, I took it as a clear indication that Heineke will start. And by the way, they're playing the Cousins-free Vikings. So you got a chance. Taylor Heineke's in a better spot than he would be with Cousins.
He did announce Wednesday he will announce the starter. He said, no matter what, I promise you, I will tell you Wednesday who's starting. Usually that means that's a new guy.
Yes, but I also would not be surprised if Wednesday comes and goes and there will be no starter announced. He's got some. His commitment to this bit is, I mean, almost admirable. All right, now moving on. More quarterback news. Daniel Jones, who has a neck issue for the second time in his career, and that spooks teams as it should. He has been practicing with the team the last couple of weeks, but hadn't been able to get cleared for contact, which is why Tyrod Taylor started the last couple of weeks on Sunday against the Jets, and so much was happening in general that didn't get to drill in on this as much. Tyrod scrambles out of the pocket, gets brought down near the sideline, suffers a rib injury. It was pretty scary because he's down on the field and he runs off the field and then kind of collapses on the sideline. They ended up taking him to the hospital for observation, and I believe as of this recording, he's still being observed at the hospital. And the news is Daniel Jones is now cleared for contact. He will return and start for the Giants in Week 9 in what is obviously a must-win for them, and that's good news because one other takeaway from that insane Jets-Giants game was Brian Daboll having a quarterback on his roster in Tommy DeVito, who went to Don Bosco Prep, which is where all like the kids where I grew up went to play sports if they were really good, by the way. So like a super local kid. he would not let him throw the ball. He finished with negative passing yards. And even in overtime, the Giants win the coin toss, and they throw 3 consecutive screen passes behind the line of scrimmage and punt the ball back to the Jets. They essentially gave up, it almost felt like, because they wouldn't let DeVito even try a pass. The fans at MetLife Stadium, it was a Giants home game, so all their fans were chanting, let him throw, let him throw. And it was just as crazy to me that they wouldn't, like, you would have this guy on your active roster, you would go through all of training camp, and he would be ostensibly throwing the ball downfield in these practices, and then when the games comes, he literally never let him throw the ball once. So thank God for Giants fans that Daniel Jones is healthy enough to return to the lineup. But that was a head scratcher to me.
Well, yeah, like I'm with you. What is he doing on an NFL? Anyone playing quarterback in an NFL roster? Are you going to be great? No, not necessarily if you're a third stringer, but you've got to be able to be trusted to, in that situation, try to make a play, go for it. So I'm with you. It was mystifying. I don't really remember a game where a team ended with negative 9 yards passing. I'm sure it's happened, but it's an outlier. The one thing about Daniel Jones, it's like the reoccurring neck issues. He's had disc issues. It's just kind of like, I know they gave him the money, but it's like the durability has been a beeline for Daniel Jones outside of last season, and he's playing behind a terrible offensive line. He was so heavily punished before he went out that it was getting hard to watch. So that is a concerning situation for his health in general.
Well, at least he gets to play the Raiders next week, but it's pretty heartbreaking for Tyrod. He's had such an unlucky career, and he's been a solid NFL quarterback. That's why he's still playing at age 36. You do wonder if that is potentially the end of his career. Hopefully he can come back this year and continue being a backup. But I think he's still in court suing the Chargers doctors for botching the injection that led to his collapsed lung. Same area. We don't have any information.
That started the career of Justin Herbert.
Right. Correct. So it's just, man, you feel for him. This whole team, this whole quarterback room seems spooked, cursed.
I went to school with again, grew up in the same area as Tommy DeVito. I went to school with a kid named Tim DeVita, and this is Tommy DeVito. A lot of Italians in my neck of the woods. Here is Tommy DeVito on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, can we please take a moment, this is from Andy Wilson, to talk about Tommy DeVito's TD chain. Yeah, it's a gold chain with maybe diamonds spelling out the name, and I could tell you as someone who grew up in and around New York, New Jersey, this is a very normal look, and people shouldn't think it's different because I know a lot of men like Tommy DeVito, and they all have that chain.
Yeah, don't shame the accessory crowd in the tri-state area for the way that they adorn themselves.
Yeah, but Dan, are any of them football players with the word your initials meaning the word for touchdown?
No, listen,
it's perfect.
I've talked about my life in the coal town a lot on this show, and there was just an uneasy existence between the Irish and the Italians, and we were all kind of in the same bucket, and we all went to the same church and all that, but the Irish and the Italians were different types of dudes, and the Irish had a certain way about them, and the Italians, they had a certain way about them. The gold chains and stuff, that was the Tommy DeVito crowd. It kind of makes me nostalgic for that time in my life. I kind of like seeing him. I wish he would have been allowed to throw a forward pass on Sunday at the Meadowlands, but he wasn't.
If it was like 1930s in the Bronx, but I understand where you're coming from.
It wasn't exactly gangs of New York. I'm not saying there was warfare, but there was definitely a rivalry in terms of those two cultures. I wish there was like a who's the butcher from what was. I wish there was a butcher character.
Benny the Butcher? No.
That was like my dad. No, what's his name? The guy, Daniel Day-Lewis. Like if my dad was actually the butcher of Pearl River, that there would have been additional pathos to the story.
Bill the Butcher. Benny the Butcher is a rapper, probably which is a takeoff of Bill the Butcher.
Yeah, definitely not referring to Betty the Butcher.
Benny.
More injury stuff. So many injuries in the NFL, it feels like this year. Falcons defensive tackle Grady Jarrett suffered a torn ACL. In the team's Week 8 loss to the Titans. He is out for the year. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, a key to what they do, and he's done for the year. Also out for the year, Greggy, Kendrick Bourne. He suffered a torn ACL, the Patriots wide receiver, in their loss. That was from Mike Garafolo. And that happened in the fourth quarter. He was having a really nice season, especially for Patriots playmakers in terms of that category. And now his season is over as well. Quite a bummer.
Their offense is so tough to watch. He had the most juice of any receiver they had, along with Demario Douglas, their rookie. So that it turned out to be a decent free agent signing. I mean, he was their second best receiver 2 years ago, was totally in the doghouse last year, was back out of it, and I expect he'll be gone. Grady Jarrett, though, is a bigger impact here, a team competing for the playoffs, and you could see the difference. They were the Titans, who have struggled to run, were really opening up some holes in that defense once Jarrett was out. He's him and AJ Terrell are the two best defensive players on that team. They're better than they used to be, so it's not as catastrophic, but they're pretty thin there. They have David Onyemata, who's been playing well, but that's a huge loss for Atlanta.
I could see that being a trade deadline, a source of activity. I could see them bringing someone in along the line. They've been so active trying to pump up that defense, and it's been good otherwise. Like
they have a ton of cap space, by the way.
Right.
It's why Kyler actually would make more sense for them than almost any team, just because they have all the cap space in the world.
Yeah, they seem active. And I like when I watched Kendrick Bourne go down, it was one of the ones where you knew right away he is gone. And like their list of leading receivers was Kendrick Bourne with 37 catches. Then the next person is Ramondre Stevenson, then Hunter Henry. And you mentioned Demario Douglas. He has 19 catches on the year. I mean,
he's been in the doghouse. He at least, unlike anyone else, he makes people miss when he gets the ball. But I hear what you're saying. Kendrick Bourne was a little more of a veteran version of Demario Douglas. Neither which, on a good team, they'd be the 3 and the 4. Not the 1 and the 2.
Let me get some other injury stuff out of the way there. Will Levis, who we talked about briefly, he balled out against the Falcons, and he's expected to start on Thursday night in place of Ryan Tannehill, who has a high ankle sprain. And you would think if Levis continues to flash, he will continue to start there, and who knows what Ryan Tannehill's future is. The Jets, also so much going on in that game. They were on their fourth string center by the second half of that game against the Giants. Connor McGovern, their starter, he suffered a dislocated kneecap. Ouch. He's out week to week. His backup comes in and only lasts a couple series before he hurts his calf, and he's going to be out sometime. And this is a great tidbit for my father-in-law, Bob Bates, because the guy they put in as the fourth stringer, and his first snap was a lost fumble, and the second snap nearly went over Zach Wilson's head and through the back of the end zone. But then he calmed down and did a great job in a really tough spot. Xavier Newman, he's a Baylor guy. That's why Bob Bates, my father-in-law, is all over it. At BU, according to Bob Bates' text, he actually started only one game at center his entire college career. And all of a sudden, he's playing in the rain in the NFL, snapping the ball. So Jets are snake bit at offensive line.
Against Dexter Lawrence, who might have had like one of the best days any defensive tackles ever
that
had.
That game was just stupid. But shout out to the Baylor Bear for holding it down. Mike Tomlin said Minkah Fitzpatrick, their defensive back, is out. I believe it's a hamstring. And the door is, quote, ajar for Kenny Pickett, who was also injured in that loss to the Jaguars. Here's Tomlin on Pickett's status.
I think the door is definitively ajar for Kenny. Probably a game time type decision based on the information that I'm holding here today, with no structural damage and so forth to his ribs. And so we see how we'll go through the week. His ability to throw, his level of comfort, his ability of effectiveness, et cetera, and let that be our guide in terms of determining his availability.
I want Mitch. I want Mitch on Thursday night. I want Mitch.
Oh, come on.
Levis. I'm not saying Mitch is going to be good, but I think he's more entertaining to watch.
I think it's time, by the way, with Mike Tomlin, right in the second half of his career, like Bono just started wearing the sunglasses all the time, inside and outside. I think Tomlin in these press conferences indoors should just wear the aviators because it's always like now it's a little weird when he's not wearing them. So why not just roll with him all the time? Because he looks cool as hell in them.
I could listen to him all day long. I think the one development that's a little interesting is that losing Minkah Fitzpatrick, I mean, I'd say you'd just hardcore rest him as much as you can. If it were the previous version of the Titans that we watched in London, dead on arrival on offense. But Minkah Fitzpatrick being absent against what we saw from Will Levis is a factor if he's going to continue to whip the ball downfield and operate like a super robot.
Will Levis, the quarterback we always wanted Justin Herbert to be. Get mad, Greg. Get mad. All right, contract news. I don't believe that. Everybody shut up. The Packers give Rashawn Gary a $107 million extension, 4 years. He's a pass rusher. He announced it on social media. This was the final year of his rookie deal. Former first-round pick. He has been a difference maker for them. He overcame a torn ACL, Greggy, and I guess this is a good time for Packers PR to fire out something like this because other news around the organization is not so hot.
I mean, shout out to Rashawn Gary for breaking this story on Twitter. What I found unique was I actually think he put the amount of money in his original tweet. I should, so it's like he's coming for your corner. Now, he didn't have like the signing bonus. Our guy Rap Sheet got there first with that. It was a $34 million signing bonus. But good job for Gary. He gets over $100 million. Our friends over at the PFF podcast, Steve Palazzolo, noted Rashawn Gary, and this was before last week, had the highest pass rush win rate of any player they've ever recorded this season so far. Like, he was on pace for it. Probably wasn't going to maintain because early on they were being careful with him coming off a torn ACL. But that's how much Rashawn Gary is winning. I don't know how their defense is so bad with so many good players, but they are.
So he's the player that they always thought Myles Garrett could be. Get me, Mark. Come at me.
No, now you've just gone into insane world.
Garrett's got posters of Rashawn Gary in his room.
Gary has a higher pressure percentage over the last 2 years than Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. So, I mean, he's sort of this gem inside that defense, and they've not been really good as a group. I mean, their offense isn't helping them out.
ACLs really used to take 2 years to recover from. I guess it's just, and sometimes people come back slow. Plenty of people. But sometimes they come back and they're better.
Von Miller.
It never happened.
I think age, definitely factors in, but for every Von Miller, now there's like a Breece Hall, and it's like, was he even hurt? Those type of situations.
And even Von Miller, the first time around, he's on his second ACL, so that
true.
doesn't help too.
That is a thing. The Bills add to their backfield. They signed playoff Lenny Fournette off the street. He'll join a Bills depth chart led by starter James Cook, who's been very good this year. And also Latavius Murray, who I like. He's an old man that's still, just go north and south, buddy, and you'll be all right. Ty Johnson is also there. And now you add playoff Lenny, but I don't know where he fits in, but he's a depth guy. He's a body at this stage.
Maybe a goal line guy for them. But I kind of, if I like it at all, because it sort of mystified me. I mean, it tells me two things. One, all right, like people are whispering about Derrick Henry still being available. The Bills are out on that one. But also, if Leonard Fournette's going to join any team, I like him joining like in November, not like we can get him for 8 or 9 weeks. That's probably a best case scenario.
I have a theory.
Let's hear it.
The mysterious Josh Allen shoulder injury is leading to some changes to their play calling near the goal line. So they want to get somebody in there that can to bang. Wild.
He did finally run in that game. I did notice they started Latavius Murray, and anytime they were in the hurry up, which they used more in that game, almost used primarily. And Allen talked afterwards, like, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe we'll do a lot of that. So maybe Fournette is an upgrade on Latavius Murray as like the hurry up back. For some reason, they don't like using James Cook for that. I don't know why.
All right. You mentioned it, Mark. So let's circle back with the trade deadline 24 hours away. Derrick Henry is still available despite, some things coming out of Tennessee. He is still available according to Jay Glazer, who is plugged in on such matters. So if you really want Derrick Henry, there's probably a pretty decent chance he can be had if you give up what the Titans are looking for, which is probably a fairly nice draft pick. And another report out there is that there is a mystery team that has offered the Commanders a conditional second-round pick for Montez Sweat. I think this is interesting because you've heard Chase Young's name put out there more in terms of the Washington pass rusher that could go at the deadline. But Mike Garafolo said on our show last week that either could be had. It just depends on what is the better offer. So Young and Sweaty could be gone. Young or Sweaty could be gone, or neither.
Florio, not our Florio, but at PFT is Mike Florio, had some information that the Falcons were sniffing around one of these players. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense with what we talked about before, especially post-injury. I kind of find this whole Commanders thing interesting where they're like, we're getting rid of one of these guys. We're not sure which, but one of these guys is going to be off our roster. Like, why? And we've already discussed like who the heck is making this decision or this order, but I don't know. I want to be post like confusing commander stuff, and this feels confusing to me. I don't quite get why you have to do that.
Oh, I was hoping for it based on the time we were taping this. Eric Roberts behind, the virtual screen. I don't know if you've been watching this, but I need some breaking news, Eric. We have a trade. Hit me with that breaking news drop. The Giants are finalizing a deal, according to our guy, Ian Rappaport, breaking that news, to send Pro Bowl defensive lineman Leonard Williams to the Seahawks, according to Rap Sheet and Mike Garafolo. Lenny Williams to Seattle.
There you go. I mean, you want to talk about, I said, speaking of that conversation with Garafolo, we're talking about how much things can change just based on the outcomes of Sunday, and the Giants losing a game that they had a 99% chance of winning, I think absolutely plays a role here in them saying, you know what, we done. So we're going to get rid of our second best defensive lineman, maybe third now, with Kayvon really emerging along that line. But Leonard Williams he was a good player on the Jets. He became a great player on the Giants, and he definitely will fill a need, Mark, for a Seattle team that needs some help in the trenches on defense.
I like it for them. I don't like it for Williams in the sense that he did the very savvy thing where while he's played for two teams, he probably didn't need to move his residence just by operating for the Jets and Giants. But now you're getting sent about as far away as you can geographically. But you're being sent to a team that suddenly and surprisingly leads the NFC West after the swoon of the Niners. So fortune's up.
And Ian in the tweet gives them some financial flexibility as a primary motivator. So that's interesting. Like for Saquon, I guess, or for who knows. Leonard Williams is a free agent, so this is more of a rental. He's, I think, 30, 31. He's not the player he used to be, but is still a good player. Seattle, might be looking to sign him to a short-term contract after this because they are sending, according to Pellraiser, and we got the skinny on the battle between these two insiders. Now I see they tweeted it out basically the same time. I think Ian barely beat him, but Tom has the trade terms. So that's interesting. Tom gets the trade terms, but Ian wins by like 20 seconds. When will this ever end? It's a 2024 second and a 2025 fifth. So that fake trade Colleen tried to send out there where she was just like asking for like a 5th round pick for Leonard Williams or something, and you scoffed at her, Dan, that was right to scoff. They got a lot more. They got a 2nd round pick.
That is a good return.
Yeah.
And that is... that just seems like a very difficult existence, the insider war. Can you imagine the semantics of it all?
Well, can you imagine if suddenly our responsibilities flipped and the three of us had to compete with each other to break news and parse up breaking news? I mean, we'd be in tatters in about 4 hours.
I'm the ATN insider, so I actually have lived in both worlds. But I do it a little bit different than the Pelisseros and the Rappaports of the world. Just put it that way.
You're a gentle insider. Methods. You're not like, Shams and Woj.
I would never. Well, for starters, if my media group ever said you have to be a co-insider, I'm walking. Like I'm gone. Like I am the only one.
For that?
Don't they all have to do that almost? Like Schefter had Mort with him for a while. Mort,
Yeah, but there's always a lead dog.
Okay,
and
fair.
I think Ian's our lead dog.
Yeah.
But if I was like, okay, here are the 2 tweets. And we're going to change the wording here, and we're going to change a participle here. I'm out. I'm gone. Okay. I'm at Yahoo the next morning. Okay. Hello, Athletic. It's me. Do you want an insider? I work alone.
I like that, and I also like the idea of like this immense career retrospective that's coming down the pipe for you at some point. That is just one of the sort of the way that it's marketed is the gentle insider.
I do really like that. Quickly on the Seahawks, by the way, I've been meaning to throw this thing. I really think they have a higher ceiling right now than I expected going into the year because their defense is so much more capable. They're not going to be a shutdown defense, but they have so many playmakers. I think some games they're really going to pop off, like different guys just making plays. I think it's the best Seahawks defense in 7 or 8 years. The offense hasn't totally clicked but they have talent there. I think their ceiling is a little higher than I expected, and this is a nice move. They lost Uchenna Nwosu, who's an edge rusher, and I know Leonard Williams is in the interior, but they were quite thin on the interior. This is a team that's pushing now. Pete Carroll's getting up there in the year. Like, this is a window. I think they think they can go make a run at it this year.
I mean,
look at
the NFC.
Yeah.
The Niners are obviously vulnerable. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They're not going to fall off the cliff, but they have proven they are far from some type of decade-spanning dominant team. The Eagles are winning for the most part, but we know that they haven't been a perfect operation either. And then after that, I mean, the Lions are obviously a very good team, but they've shown themselves to be vulnerable. Cowboys, same thing. It's a wide open NFC, so I think it's trade. Giving up a second-round pick, that's pricey, and the Seahawks have been hurt before, looking for that one final piece on D. And giving up high draft assets, but this one I think makes a lot of sense, and Williams, I bet, will be excited to play with that team. So, good one. Makes sense for both sides. And you're right. I think the takeaway about finally changing his address is notable, Mark, and should be a conversation point as well.
Beautiful area of the country, though, Mark. Maybe expand his horizons,
No, it does.
Yeah, you ever hear Puget Sound, bro?
Like he can live on the water,
He's also, it's not the same as when, some Joe Blow has to travel across the country to get a job and, pay for it themselves. This guy's like a multimillionaire. I'm sure like nice moving trucks will come and move all sorts of gold chains and big boxes of, treasure, like from east to west. So
he actually has like old school cartoon treasure chests that were found at the bottom of oceans throughout the centuries.
Yeah, it's possible.
Finally, in the news, there's a good little newsy thing. Eric Roberts, we got to slap that headline on there. This from Front Office Sports. The NFL has demanded that the University of Houston stop unauthorized use of the Oilers' trademarked Love You Blue uniform. And here it is. If you're watching on YouTube, it is obviously a callback to the old Love You Blue Oilers era. Check out Chris Wessling's Love You Blue feature he wrote years back for our site. It was excellent. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on here. First of all, the gonads of the Tennessee Titans. Imagine, Mark, and I understand this situation was different because it was so contentious when the Browns were taken from Cleveland that the Browns won the right to keep all their IP. So the Ravens could never do something like have a throwback in Baltimore wearing Browns orange, which is confusing, but that's the way it is there. So that couldn't happen. But the idea that you would ever want to do that, I mean, I'm watching. The only thing I didn't like about Will Levis's debut is that he's wearing the uniform of a team that was ripped from a city. And that is a salty reality for Houston football fans that now have the Texans but miss the Oilers and those beautiful get-ups. So we got two levels bothering me. One, that happened at all, and you should have the good sense if you leave a city behind and all their fans not to antagonize them from 1,000 miles away. And two, now the NFL is saying to this Houston area that still has a lot of pride about those old Oilers teams, you don't even get to call back to that for your local college. Just come on, guys. Can we just clean up the entire operation? End of rant.
Yeah, like for me, the levels of absurdity up top are trying to go at the University of Houston in regards to a uniform that was attached to a team that the NFL did very little to prevent from moving. The whole thing went down in a way where it was a little bit different than Cleveland. It was sort of a wet fart. It happened a year after the Browns were pulled to Baltimore, and the Houston civic uproar was not the same. But this next level of absurdity is the Titans doing that. The only thing that I'm torn about is that, we have our childhood football worlds, and those old Oilers uniforms were wonderful to watch. So I kind of love seeing them in action, but the way that it came to us is problematic. Agreed.
Also, this is picking a nit here, but those uniforms look quite a bit like the well-regarded, well-reviewed Tulane University blue unis they broke out a little bit. Former AAC rival Tulane. So they're trying to copy Tulane's nice, clean unis. But let Houston wear it. I'm with you. Good rant.
All right, that was insane. That was an insane little addendum there, Greg.
Top 25 team, baby. Let's enjoy it while we can here.
All right, there's what's happening in the news. Yes, so we needed to jump in. Obviously, so much to get to, including a breaking news trade. Leonard Williams fortifying that front seven in Seattle, and the Giants looking ahead to 2024 and beyond. We'll be back later tonight with a recap of Monday Night Football, a matchup between, Mark?
The Raiders and the Lions of Detroit.
There you go. So make sure you check that out. And that's it for now. All right, we all have to head into the studio now. We got to do an NFL Plus recording. They're getting their money's worth here. Heed the call.